By 1944, the German soldier was one of the most battle-hardened fighters in the history of warfare. He had been through Poland, through France, through the Eastern Front, North Africa, and the brutal mountain fighting of Italy. He was not easy to rattle. And yet, interrogation records, captured letters, and German after-action reports from that period contained something that German military culture almost never admitted out loud: fear. Not fear of dying, they had made peace with that. Fear of specific American weapons, specific American systems, things the U.S. military had built, deployed, and unleashed on them that disrupted everything Germany had planned, trained for, and believed about modern warfare. This is that list. These are the 10 American weapons that made the German army fear the United States, backed by documented accounts from the soldiers who faced them. Number 10. The M3 Grease Gun Submachine Gun. It looked like a plumber's tool. It sounded wrong. It felt cheap in your hands. German soldiers who first saw captured M3 submachine guns reportedly laughed. They stopped laughing in the hedgerows. The M3 was stamped from sheet metal, assembled in minutes, and cost around $20 to produce, a fraction of the cost of a Thompson. The Army built it because they needed a close-quarters weapon fast, in enormous numbers, that any soldier could operate under any conditions. Germans didn't resent the mechanics. They resented what the gun said about the Americans who built it. In every kind of tight, brutal fighting, inside buildings, through the bocage, across factory floors, the M3 delivered .45 caliber rounds at a rate that ended engagements before the other side could organize a response. It jammed sometimes. It wasn't elegant. But there were thousands of them. Then tens of thousands. Then more arriving every week. A weapon Germany dismissed as disposable became one of the defining instruments of the close-quarters war they had not expected to fight. Number 9. The M1911 45 ACP pistol. Most sidearms are an afterthought. The M1911 was not. The M1911 had been the standard American military sidearm since before the First World War, and the 45 ACP cartridge it fired had a reputation that preceded it into every theater. German soldiers captured in North Africa and Italy gave consistent accounts. The 45 hit differently. Men struck with it at close range didn't stay in the fight. The round's heavy, slow-moving mass transferred energy in a way that ended encounters fast. German sidearms, the Luger, later the P-38, fired 9mm rounds that were faster but lighter. The difference in terminal effect was documented, debated, and feared. American officers, paratroopers, and special operations troops carried the M1911 into the worst fighting of the war: Normandy, Aachen, the Bulge, the Hurtgen Forest. It was still standard issue in Korea, still serving with some units through Vietnam, still in use with certain special operations elements into the 1980s. 7 decades of continuous service. Germany retired the Luger before the war ended. Number 8. The M2 Browning 50 caliber machine gun. Germany had no answer to this weapon. Not in the field, not in the factory, not on paper. The M2 Browning fired a half-inch diameter round at over 2,900 feet per second, sustained, from a weapon light enough to mount on a Jeep. It went on tanks, half-tracks, aircraft, and fixed defensive positions. Wherever American forces went, the M2 went with them. What separated the 50 caliber from anything in the German inventory was what it did to things other than infantry. Light armor? Gone. Trucks, armored cars, half-tracks, vulnerable at ranges where German crews thought they were safe. Aircraft attempting low strafing runs discovered that American ground positions could return fire with something that punched through engine cowlings. German infantry who had calculated safe engagement distances based on standard machine gun doctrine found those calculations simply didn't hold. John Browning designed it over 100 years ago. The M2 is still in American military service today. Some weapons earn retirement. This one never needed it. Number 7. The M1 Garand rifle. The German infantryman carried a Karabiner 98K. It was a precise, well-crafted, bolt-action rifle. Accurate, powerful, and exactly what German military doctrine called for. Aimed fire, controlled engagements, disciplined shooting. Then they ran into American infantry armed with the M1 Garand. The Garand was the only standard-issue semi-automatic battle rifle fielded by any army in World War II. While every other frontline soldier worked a bolt between shots, the American pulled the trigger again and again. 8 rounds without touching the bolt. At Normandy, German commanders reported receiving fire they initially estimated as coming from entire companies, only to discover it was a single American platoon. One platoon, firing like a company. That wasn't a morale problem. That was a mathematics problem. General Patton called the Garand the greatest battle implement ever devised. Germany understood the gap. They tried to close it with the Gewehr 41 and 43, but both were plagued with reliability problems and never produced in numbers that mattered. American factories turned out over 5 million Garands during the war. The problem the Garand created never went away. Number 6. The M4 Sherman tank. The Sherman was not a better tank than the Tiger. German panzer crews knew it. Allied crews knew it. The Sherman's 75mm gun frequently bounced off Tiger armor at standard combat ranges. The Tiger's 88mm could kill a Sherman from distances that made return fire nearly useless. In a one-on-one engagement, Germany held every advantage. So why did the Sherman break the Wehrmacht? Because there were 50,000 of them. 49,324 M4 Shermans were built between 1942 and 1945, across 11 American plants running around the clock. Total German production of the Tiger I, across the entire war, 1,347. The King Tiger, 492. The Panther, considered by many historians the finest tank of the war, reached just over 6,000 total units. American foundries were producing Shermans faster than German guns could destroy them. Panzer commanders who defeated Allied armor in the morning found fresh replacements arriving by afternoon. There is a particular kind of dread that comes not from facing something you can't beat, but from facing something you can beat, over and over again, and watching it keep coming. The Sherman didn't outfight the Tiger. It outlasted it. Number 5. The M3 half-track. At some point during the North African campaign, German commanders began doing something that says more than any report could. When they captured American M3 half-tracks, they kept them. They painted over the American markings, put German crews inside, and drove them. The Wehrmacht had its own half-track, the SD KFZ-251, engineered specifically for Panzer Grenadier operations. On paper, the superior vehicle. And yet, German soldiers grabbed M3s when they found them. The reason was practical. The M3 was easier to maintain, easier to repair in the field, and available in quantities the 251 could never match. American soldiers called the M3 the Purple Heart Box. The armor was thin, the top was open, and everyone riding inside knew it. It was never designed to be a fighting vehicle. It was designed to move men fast, then get out of the way. What unnerved German planners wasn't the vehicle itself. It was the logic behind it. Build something good enough, build it in massive numbers, and keep the losses replaceable. Germany never cracked that formula. The M3 half-track outlasted the Wehrmacht by decades, with some variants still in service into the 1990s. Number 4. American Artillery, the Time-on-Target System. This weapon has no single name and no serial number, but no other entry on this list produced more documented fear in German frontline accounts than what American artillery did with a targeting method Germany had no equivalent for. It was called Time on Target, TOT, and by the time American forces hit France, the U.S. Army had turned it into a signature weapon unlike anything the Germans could answer. Multiple artillery batteries, sometimes spread miles apart, each calculate the precise flight time of their shells to a single target. Each battery fires at a different moment, timed so that every round from every gun arrives simultaneously. No warning, no ranging shots, no time to react. Just silence, and then total destruction arriving from nowhere at once. German soldiers who survived TOT strikes left consistent accounts. The sudden, all-at-once nature of the bombardment was unlike anything they had been trained to handle. No incoming signal to respond to. No first wave to seek cover from. Just an instantaneous wall of steel. The Army Historical Foundation documented the effect in post-war analysis. Strikes dropping without warning created constant, relentless attrition in German frontline positions. Troops couldn't move, couldn't regroup, couldn't predict when the next one was coming. The fire direction mathematics, the radio coordination, the doctrine refined at Fort Sill, the Americans executed it at a scale and speed Germany simply could not match. Number 3. The P-47 Thunderbolt. German soldiers fighting in Normandy in the summer of 1944 developed a word for their particular nightmare: Jabos, short for Jagdbomber, fighter bombers, specifically American ones. A German divisional staff officer wrote in his diary that no hour passed during daylight without the nerve-frazzling thunder of strafing fighters overhead. Every vehicle on an open road was a target. Fuel depots, ammunition columns, artillery positions, all under constant threat from aircraft that combined the speed of a fighter with the ordnance of a light bomber. The P-47 Thunderbolt was the primary instrument of that terror. From D-Day to VE Day, P-47 pilots claimed destruction of 86,000 German railroad cars, 9,000 locomotives, 6,000 armored vehicles, and 68,000 trucks. During Operation Cobra, a single group of Thunderbolts caught a German column near Rancy and destroyed 122 tanks, 259 vehicles, and 11 artillery pieces in one engagement. The German army lost freedom of movement in its own rear areas during daylight. Field Marshal Rommel was nearly killed by a Jabos strafing run in July 1944. Germany's response? Late-war German anti-aircraft weapons and projects picked up a nickname, the Jabos-Schreck, roughly, fighter-bomber terror. They named their defenses after what they were afraid of. That's not a military designation. That's a confession. Number 2. The B-17 Flying Fortress. In 1943, the 8th Air Force began doing something Germany had declared impossible: daylight strategic bombing of the German homeland. The British had tried it and abandoned it after catastrophic losses. Night bombing was the only survivable approach, or so Germany believed. America disagreed. The B-17 Flying Fortress flew in daylight, in tight defensive formations, relying on concentrated fire from 10 50-caliber machine guns per aircraft to fight through enemy interceptors. The losses were severe. The Schweinfurt raids of 1943 were among the most costly air operations of the war, but the crews went back. Over 12,700 B-17s were built during the war. They flew more than 290,000 sorties and dropped close to 650,000 tons of bombs on German industrial targets, rail networks, and oil infrastructure. Albert Speer, Hitler's armaments minister, wrote after the war that the sustained American bombing campaign was the single greatest threat to German war production, greater than the Eastern Front, greater than the ground war in the West. Germany pulled frontline troops to man anti-aircraft batteries and devoted enormous industrial resources to defending against the B-17. They never stopped it. It just kept coming. Number 1. The Arsenal of Democracy Itself. The deepest fear German commanders expressed, the one that shows up in captured correspondence, in the memoirs of generals, in the interrogation records of senior officers, wasn't fear of any single weapon on this list. It was the fear of the country behind them. Germany built weapons technically superior to most of what America fielded, The Tiger was better than the Sherman. The MG-42 outperformed the M1919. The Me-262 was faster than anything the Allies flew. Germany still lost. Because American factories were building 45 Sherman tanks every single day. Wehrmacht officers in private correspondence captured after the war described a despair that set in not during their defeats, but during their victories. They would destroy 50 Shermans in an afternoon, and by the next morning, 60 more were already unloading at the port. You cannot win a war of attrition against a country that cannot be attrited. Panzer Commander Heinz Guderian wrote after the war that Germany had been defeated not by the quality of Allied weapons, but by the quantity, that American production had made every German tactical advantage temporary and ultimately meaningless. That was the dark reason the German army feared the United States, not because any single weapon was unbeatable, because the country that built them was. If that's the kind of history you want, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Drop a comment below with the weapon or battle you want covered next. Some of our best videos started exactly there. We'll see you in the next one.